So if I can follow up, since we're talking about sort of what your goals were in leaking the classified information, there's obviously whistleblowers have an ethical problem that they have to work through, and I'd like to talk about how you approached it. There's your duty as a member of the military, and your duties to handle classified information, and then there's obviously another duty that you felt outweighed it. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, and talk in particular, one question I have is why there were so many documents. If there was something that needed, in your view, to be made public, why wasn't it targeted as opposed to 750,000?
It was targeted. That was the target. I mean, that is the number.
So I honestly don't know what was the thing that you really wanted to be public
The whole
in a
thing.
specific way. Okay, but that's a lot of, there were a lot of things. There were 250,000 diplomatic cables, I think.
Yep.
On a variety of topics, about a variety of things.
Yep.
So
There you go.
could I maybe ask a different version of that
Please.
question then?
Yeah.
Please.
Because actually one of the things that, this is maybe building on the first question I asked, is I hear in your remarks a deep and abiding faith in the power of revealing truth. And the optimistic side of me sees that and then can immediately see the value of, yes, you reveal everything.
Right.
Because that's the point.
Right.
But I take Becky's question to actually be more skeptical, if I'm
Right.
interpreting that right. And so
Yes.
maybe that would be a better way of framing it. Could you say a bit about the difference between making a tactical release versus a principled commitment to just unveiling secrets in general?
Well, I mean, I think that there's this notion, especially by more, by the more liberal discourse, in which it's about bad apples. Whenever it's like the entire barrel is like the problem, and I think that these, our military-industrial complex and the diplomatic and international relations and systems that we have that back that up, often called neoliberalism, the IMF, the State Department, World Bank, and all of the complicated, political and back-dealing and arrangements that we have in the world were the things that supported our actions, and what those actions look like is important. So it's all about contextualizing the entirety of the whole thing. It's not about one event in one place at one time. It is about the structures of the entire system and what that looks like and what that causes and what that brings about. So it's really not about one thing. It's about everything.
I guess that seems to me a major ethical problem, because I can't imagine someone saying, look, I had these competing duties, and I decided that it was important that the world know about a thing, and if it's a specific thing, I can imagine, yes, okay. But if it's sort of, well, it's everything, then I find that a little unsatisfying. A duty to expose everything outweighing something that you've agreed to take on seems to me quite difficult, and I guess I'm not quite convinced that the ethics of what you did outweighs what I would see as a responsibility to maintain secrets. Can you say more about?
Well, first off, the government doesn't keep secrets because it has an actual rational reason. Now, it started off, I'm sure, at one point like, oh yes, we have, this particular bit of information, but it's become more broad and more sweeping and more general, and it's like now it's encroaching every sector of society. Everything, and we're getting to the point where everything is a national security issue. I mean, just think about it. Think about the political discourse and discussion that we've had since 9/11, in which every single thing now is becoming more and more like this critical national security issue, and we need need more security, more state, and more power, and it's always more. So we have the largest military in the world. We have the largest prison population in the world. We have the most broad and expansive intelligence apparatus in the entire world. We have connections with every single nation state except for one or two, that are deep and deep-rooted, even with countries that we don't like necessarily. We share, all kinds of relationships with them. And so we've become this like incredibly powerful force in the world, and there's all these things that everybody knows about, but they're the actual core parts of it, even though we know it's there, when you see it in all of its scope and all of its reality, it makes it sort of takes the veil off of it, And I think that when you're talking about making an ethical decision regarding the secrecy of a state apparatus that is literally a whirling death machine around the world, then I think you need that is where you kind of have to make the calculation that maybe this isn't about one thing, and maybe that's the whole problem, is because we're always looking for, it's one thing here, it's one thing there, whenever it's actually the whole thing.
So this is maybe circling back to an earlier point, but how powerful is it really to do that unveiling, though? Because I understand that it's like an important part, but I think, how many things have we unveiled about American militarism abroad, which has, and I'm skeptical that any serious consequences come out of it. So I'm always wondering, what are the things we do specifically beyond uncovering these the systemic nature of like American crimes abroad that would mitigate it?
Well, it doesn't. Simply revealing it doesn't solve it. That's not it doesn't do anything. Like, you have to do other things. You have to actually take, society has to actually take action and push back.
Can you say a bit about what you imagine that kind of action to look like then?
No, I can't. I mean, you can't. That's not the problem was, and this this is a very important thing, I think, to contextualize this, is in early 2010. I remember that the approval rating of the Iraq War was going up. I think it was almost 65%. People thought it was going well. The Obama administration had come in, and there was sort of like this breathing sigh of relief of like, oh well, we did, we brought democracy. Sort of like a rebranding of like how Iraq was played out, and like the media had this thing where it was just like, well, it looked like it was going bad, but it was actually the right decision, and that's no longer the case. That fact alone, it's hard to imagine that somebody would say those things, but those were exactly the kinds of things that people were saying in January and February of 2010. And more than anything else, I think it was this radical, frightening cognitive dissonance between the horrors and the death and destruction and despair that I saw wrought upon people, and this bubbly notion of we brought democracy to a place, whenever you don't see that. What I'm seeing with my own eyes every day is the complete opposite of that. I don't know what we did, but I know substantively what an insurgency and a counterinsurgency looks like, but I know that because I've seen it with my own eyes, and I've worked with that data before, and I've made predictive analysis, calculations on that before. But looking at data by itself doesn't provide the meaning or the context. It's the dot, the dot's really connected for me, because I view this as like a data scientist at one point, where I'm looking at statistics, I'm looking at data, I'm looking at connections, I'm looking at predictions, I'm looking at graphs, charts, maps. But then there was this moment when I'm there, and it's just like, these are people. This is millions of people's lives every single day. People that I know more about some of these people than they could ever know about themselves, based on the predictive analysis algorithms that I'm working with. And I realized that this is not a data set. This is reality. This is humanity. This is what war is and what it looks like and what it feels like. And the data just is that they're the dots that when you connect the dots. When you start to connect the dots, you realize, oh my God, this is reality, and these are people, and like that's a threshold that once crossed, I can never return back